the way that technology is getting sold through solution providers is by making the solution provider's life easier. Like, who's easiest to do business with? Yeah. Who understands what I need to be successful? So things like incentive programs, instead of just like giving you an incentive for selling something, it's giving you an incentive for doing something that builds your business.
Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Heather, welcome to today's episode. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoyed our brief chat last week, I believe it was. And I look forward to hearing more of your story today and sharing with the audience more about you. Let me start here a second. So what people know is that when I started this podcast, I really went through friends and family first. And then along the way, I was meeting new people and introduced to people, but then I became a hunter. And I started really digging into the places like LinkedIn, other magazines, my social network to see who's, 1 or 2 degrees away. And I started reading a lot on LinkedIn, picking up their vibe and see what they write and see what they talk about. You've got a good amount of content out there, right? And video. And I really loved what you had to say. Super positive, a lot of energy, entrepreneurial spirit, big smile. And as we saw in the pictures, we both matched the blue eyes. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're gray.
Exactly.
But I was like, you know what? I like Heather's energy. Let me reach out to her. Let's get on a phone call. I think when we talked, it was like I was talking to somebody I'd talked to 50 times before, which is always, thank you. It was always the best fit. So please, if you would, introduce yourself to the audience. Take as much time as you'd like.
Sure. Where to begin? So Heather K. Margolis, and I always use the middle initial because when I first changed my last name 18 years ago, if you Googled me, you found Cindy Margolis. I'll let people figure out who that is, but she's not an intelligent consultant. So
okay.
I always use the middle initial K. Grew up in Massachusetts, small town in Massachusetts, worked in a hardware store, worked in an auto body shop. Like, I always had the jobs that were not stereotypically for girls. And then just fourth generation entrepreneur, went to college sort of knowing that I had to figure out a vocation, and then went to grad school knowing that I needed to build that confidence, get sort of the foundation of, getting an MBA so that I could start a business eventually.
Fantastic. And where did that lead you? Why don't you take us back a little bit into a bit of your journey? And then if you don't mind, I may ask some questions along the way. Yeah,
please. So I first got my start in financial services. I worked at a hedge fund and a VC firm, and amazing experience, but just knew that it wasn't for me. I didn't know why yet. I sort of figured that out later. But was super interested in tech. So this is, late 90s, early 2000s. And really was focused on trying to get into tech. When I graduated from business school, a classmate of mine had started working at EMC before it was Dell EMC. I'm dating myself. And got me an interview in channel marketing. And I had no idea. I knew marketing. I didn't know the channel. And the woman that I eventually started working for, Cindy Herndon, I said to her when she made me the offer, I'm a very quick study and I know a lot about marketing, but I don't know much about the channel. And she said, I'm going to teach you everything I know. And we always joke to this day that she overshot a little bit because, spoiler alert, the name of the company that I started is Channel Maven. And we're very, very focused on the channel and very passionate about that.
Fantastic. So, already here we're, 3 minutes and 54 seconds in. And I think that, people watching and listening can understand that you have this passion and fire and you have a good positive way to articulate. I like to take people back, where did these seeds get planted? Do you have an early memory of your life and growing up. And, you said you're fourth generation entrepreneur. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience watching others in the entrepreneurial way? And maybe
Yeah.
we could unpack a little bit about how that bug bit you.
Yeah. So I guess earliest, it's so funny because it was never something different to me. Like we would go visit my grandfather and or grandparents, and my grandmother was always in the kitchen making something. And my grandfather was always in the basement, which he had redone as an office. And he was a structural engineer. So he would make sure that buildings were safe. He always used to say, if an engineer built a building without an architect, they would make him take it down because it was so awful. But if an architect built a building without an engineer, it would just fall down. So
That's great. I love
choose
that.
your poison, right? And when I would go down to the basement, he had 2 desks and there were papers everywhere. There was no computer, right? There was no computer on his desk. He had a phone. And
Lots of
he had
pencils.
lots of mechanical pencils in his pocket, of course, with like a pocket protector.
Oh, perfect.
And he had an assistant, and he had built, if you went into the side of his office, there were these French doors that you would open, small, just like, lattice, like a closet, and a pull down desk that he had built for me. So when I would come visit, he'd pull down the desk and there were all these pencils and highlighters for me and paper and, the compass so that you could make circles. And, to me, it was just sort of like, this is how people work. I would visit my parents in an office. At the time, my dad was working for someone else. He eventually started his own business. And as a high schooler, I guess, early high school, late middle school, I got to watch him start that from nothing, from being in our basement, to eventually moving out to an office with employees and like a parking lot that I had
Amazing.
to go shovel and earn my allowance. And it just to me was sort of like how people worked. It wasn't anything that was necessarily different. There's a story. I don't remember it specifically, but there's a story of someone visiting my parents and asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I just like matter of factly said the boss. Like,
Oh, wow. Okay.
At 6, I knew. So I think when I was in undergrad and certainly when I was in business school, I went to Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which has been the number 1 or 2 entrepreneurial school in the country for like 25 years running. I knew that eventually I was going to start something. I just didn't know what yet. So I needed to sort of get my experience in financial services, know that it wasn't that, and then get my experience in tech and know that that really was where my passion was. And my dad's business was as a civil engineer. He ran an environmental engineering firm, but he was so, handy is the wrong term, like just sort of strategic about how things worked. When I was little, we would like build little robots or do little projects and always worked on the car. I had a 1984 Audi 5000. That thing, whether it was the hydraulics in the clutch, just totally, splashing all over the pavement as I was leaving high school, or the, steering going out because the fluid ran out of that. He and I were always working on that, or one of the cars. He enjoyed rebuilding Porsches. We had a list in the
Nice.
garage. Like, I just was always super handy and sort of had that engineering mind. So tech for me was, I didn't want to be the technical person. I didn't want to be doing the implementations, but it just made sense to me. Like my brain could wrap myself around how things work and then how to market them, right? Like you have to know how it works to know what the benefit is and what the business outcome that eventually will come out of that is. So that brought me to EMC, and just, super passionate about building relationships. Always. I always got on my report card in high school too talkative. And, I would get like
Boy, I'm
punished
surprised.
for being right. I would get like punished for being too talkative.
Yeah.
And I look back now and thank goodness, right?
Yeah,
like
now
that
you're
has
rewarded
become
for it.
my vocation.
It's your thing.
Exactly.
It's funny
Exactly.
you mentioned how things work. And the thing I love about having these conversations with people, and I'm telling you, I just love doing this. it gives me a lens into some things I might not have even figured out about myself.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have engineering influences, but my grandfather was a work with his hands kind of guy. He built things. He ultimately went on to be superintendent of apartment buildings in New York, where I grew up. So he was always fixing things and, Italian guy, Vittorio, come along, and get that wrench, do this, do that. I mean, he never just made me watch. He made me do. And quickly, from not only watching him, but doing, I started really understanding how a lot of things worked because I got to take them apart and put them back together and fix them. And this is the little part. And it went across, things in homes and buildings. And then next part of my journey was music business. And we'll talk about that at a later time. But then I was attracted to and interested in the recording studio itself. And largely due thanks to my brother, who used to hire me part-time to help him. He was an engineer, but built radio stations. So now I'm learning signal flow and how things work. So finally, when I got into technology, understanding how things work and tying that to business process and really understanding how technology works and the fabric comes together, all of that came from the early influences, much like you're describing, that you were put in a situation to observe, to watch, and to be a part of how things work. Man, what a blessing. What a blessing.
Yeah.
And, sounds like from your family, this communication gift, I could tell a lot about people when they talk about, see, you're doing it now. They smile. They smile
Yeah.
and they talk, and it's like they're enjoying the process of talking. Because I've talked to a lot of people that have that curmudgeon face.
Right.
And you're like, my God, this is so painful for them. Can't even compute. But
I also think it's like right now we're building a connection, but I'm also remembering stories like you talking about your grandfather.
Yeah.
I'm remembering stories about mine. I'm remembering stories about my dad, my mom, my stepdad is super, super technical. He's also an engineer. And just all of the things that we've learned. Like, I think people who are entrepreneurs, it's because they strive for more than the day to day. Like, if my dad had been, I don't want to, defame accountants, but like if my dad had been an accountant who went to work every day and came home and left work at work and never talked about work at dinner and never, while I was doing my homework, he was writing proposals.
Yeah.
And I think that, that way of growing up and just sort of wanting to like better your life and wow, did I see it, right? When I was born, my parents lived in a cabin in New Hampshire with like 2 bedrooms and a loft. Like there were deer walking around outside. And to the point where by the time I was in college, my parents were doing incredibly well, not just financially, but just like surrounding themselves with really amazing people, showing me how to be a badass. Like, my stepmom's a politician, and
Really?
she just got sworn in as the president of the state senate in Massachusetts. And
oh my gosh, congratulations to her.
What a badass, right? Like seeing her as a kid. I remember one time she ran for, it would have been like something in town. It was smaller, either school committee or when she was state rep. And I said, and if you don't win, we'll just like do it again next year. And it was a full family thing. Like we went to parades and all of us were decorating the car and handing out, candy to the
It is
kids.
a family.
Yeah. And, she said, if I run, I'm not going to lose. And I just remember being like, yep.
I love it.
And I brought all of that with me, all of those experiences.
That's so fantastic. So, as we reel back a little bit, Grandpa got the fold down table, which kudos to Grandpa, because talk about, not only wanting to spend time with his family and his granddaughter, but like that opportunity. It's like my grandfather bringing me to work, Vittorio, go down to the boiler. I don't know if you've ever been in a New York City apartment building.
Not New York, but Boston. Yeah.
Okay. All right. But when you go into the basement, the room that supplies the heat and the hot water is like half the size of a gymnasium, or used to be half the size of a gymnasium. These boilers were they look like castles inside of a building.
Massive. Yeah.
And yeah, lots of fire, which, if my grandfather would have been alive today and put me near it as a young kid, endangering the welfare of a child would have been on his
Exactly.
scorecard.
I'm sure
But
there was no asbestos down there either.
oh no, not at all. you know, you know, none. The place was full of asbestos, by the way.
Yeah.
But just what a blessing and what a fun part of your story. So come out of that a little bit. You've got this really influential upbringing. You're watching entrepreneurs. You've got your hands in the mix, like you're watching people who do stuff.
Yeah.
Take me on a little bit from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a bit of a juxtaposition. I never really did well in school, and it wasn't just because I was too talkative. And I think that added tension to my relationship with my parents. Like, they thought I was lazy or distracted. I was really trying, but it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, I'm trying and still getting bad grades, and you're telling me I'm lazy. So I'm just going to mess around and be lazy. And like, I didn't do great in college, but I knew all my professors and like had good relationships and did extra work and was like a teacher's assistant for a lot of them. And I always did well at work. So working at a hardware store when I was 13 years old, some guy would walk in and be like, "Where's the guy that works here?" Some older gentleman.
Yeah.
And I'd say, "What do you need?" He'd be like, "You won't know. It's that oil that you put in and then it goes around." I was like, 2-in-1 oil, halfway down the third aisle on the bottom on your left. And that to me was like my pride. Like I sucked at school, but this I was good at. And the fact that if it was something physical, I could memorize, I could figure it out. If it was technical, I could figure it out. I found out 3 years ago. So this is my whole childhood. Yeah. Grad school, I was the bottom 10% of my class, and probably the top 10% as far as who's been successful. I found out 3 years ago that I am dyslexic, and that sitting down and reading a book doesn't work for me. I don't retain any of it. But if I walk around and listen to a book, or I listen to a book while I'm taking notes, or I rewrite an entire chapter of a math book, I can get it. So it took me that long to figure out
I wonder if I'm dyslexic. I wonder if, you just described, well, first of all, I have a nephew who's been diagnosed dyslexic. So
it is the only learning disability that's hereditary.
Well, there you go. Because if I do read, I should say when I do read, it is painful. Okay. But it is a forced discipline for me. I have to do it. Matter of fact, I wrote a book last year just to break through the barrier.
Yeah.
It was painful. I'm publishing a second one here next quarter. Maybe this quarter. I'm getting very close. Because I wanted to beat the sickness, so to speak. I'm like, there's no way, like reading books were always so painful for me.
Yeah.
But if I were using the book as a manual where I referred to sections to find information, like I can absorb that little chunk and then go do it.
Yes, exactly. If I hear someone, like my grandfather and my dad and my stepfather, all storytellers, like they all, I can remember, not only can I remember a story or something that happened to me or a conversation I had, I can remember what we were wearing. Like it's to that point because I have to picture it in my brain for it to actually get retained. The thing that did it for me. So everyone says, "Oh, you must have reversed your letters." Never reversed my letters. That was never part of the issue. It was always that if I read it, I couldn't retain it. But if I heard it, I could. It drives my mother-in-law crazy when I'm like, "Remember the time you said this?" And she's like, "No, I don't, but I have a really good memory."
I know you're not a doctor and you might play one on TV, but I think you might have just diagnosed me.
There you go.
Because
it's so freeing.
Well, because one of the things that I had to do through school just to get through. And it became a study routine for me. If I just read it, I was useless. But what I did was I read it. The next time I read it, I said it loud.
Yeah.
And then I would rewrite it. So now I'm hitting three senses, right? I'm mechanically doing it. I'm reading it and taking it in. I'm speaking it, so I'm hearing it back. Like I needed three vectors to be able to get, and that's how I would get. And it's funny, I would create a cheat sheet for
Yeah.
a test, and by writing it down and then saying it out loud, by the time test came around, I never needed it.
Exactly.
I never needed it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it
I'll send
was
you my
super
copay when
eye-opening.
we're done here. I'll send you.
Awesome.
I think my
I'll send
specialist
you my
copay is
bill.
$50, so that's all
Yeah.
you're getting.
I am right now reading all of Alex Hormozy's book. I'm actually going to a workshop with Alex Hormozy and his wife Layla run a company called
I know who they are.
Position.com. They are amazing coaches and have just amazing business advice. So I read both of his books while listening to them on Audible and rewriting the book for my business. So he would give an example of a gym. He started out starting gyms, and I would rewrite the advice he was giving or the equation that he had mapped out for my business. And I now have a notebook with 40 pages of notes that I then go back and read and highlight because that's my book. That's my manual. So it's more work, but I have to tell you, I always thought that I was stupid and pulling one over on people. Like I ran this successful business. I sold a successful business. People don't realize that I'm a fraud. Like I'm actually not that smart. But then I
Imposter
would get
syndrome.
in front of, right. But then I would like be in front of a consulting client and we would be working out their problems and they would say, God, that's brilliant. And I'd be like, it's brilliant. Like that.
Yeah.
The stuff that I'm able to apply, my experiences, what I'm hearing when I'm listening. I always say reading, but I'm not reading anything. I'm listening to everything. Really has, I'm very smart at working out. I have huge pattern recognition is in like the 99th percentile. I ended up getting assessed because I was like, am I truly dyslexic? And
Recently? You got
3 years.
assessed? Okay.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go get assessed?
Yeah. So my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia and, her dad and I were watching a documentary on dyslexia with Richard Branson and Charles Schwab and Gavin Newsom. Like we're in good company. And, they gave an example. So Richard Branson said, I walked out of a board meeting and one of my employees came up to me and said, sir, I don't think you understand the difference between gross income and net income. And he said, you're right, I don't. And the employee said, so there's an ocean of fish, that's gross. And a net comes down and pulls some of the fish out, but not all of them. And I looked at my, at the time, husband and said, I think I'm dyslexic. And he went, oh yeah, you're totally dyslexic. So I had just sold Channel Maven and Spark Your Channel to a company called 360 Insights. And I was being put in front of the board. I was meeting with the CFO and he was like throwing up a spreadsheet from software and trying to like show me my budget. And I just was like, can you download this into a spreadsheet? Like I can't, my brain's not wrapping around how the software is working. Yeah. So I went to get assessed because I wanted to be able to hand them a piece of paper that said, I have dyslexia and I don't need anything from you except more time. Like don't get in a meeting with me and pull up a spreadsheet and say, all right, let's go over this. Like I need the spreadsheet an hour before the meeting.
Yeah.
And don't expect, I don't want to use that software anymore. Like I just want the person on the accounting team who's assigned to me to just send me a spreadsheet every month. Yeah. I don't want to have to deal with that. And that's what it came down to. But it was super, it built a lot of confidence for me to go through the testing and have the neuropsychologist say to me, like, you're very smart and your pattern recognition is off the charts. But yeah, you struggle with retaining written information and like making sense of something on a spreadsheet on a screen.
So yeah,
I
have some thoughts, but I'm curious as to what were the specific strategies you had to deploy to overcome that? Did you know about them in advance? Were you just doing them instinctively? And has the testing changed any of what you do?
I think the testing changed, to your point, the imposter syndrome. Like, I don't have that anymore. I know what I'm good at. And I'm the first, like, I was meeting with a client who, said to me, we're seeing a decrease in, logins to the partner portal. I think the content's not interesting. And I was like, well, but they'd still have to log in to see that the content isn't interesting. So logins wouldn't go down, like
Right.
dwell time would go down. And I said, do you think it has anything to do with, like 40% of the tech industry just got laid off? Like, are there just fewer people? So like pulling a variable that you wouldn't necessarily look at, that's the type of stuff. And I said to her, I am neurodiverse and I come up with variables that people aren't thinking of on a regular basis.
Right.
I think people appreciate that. I also surround myself when I'm hiring with very detail oriented people, right?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
that's
I'm
what I miss.
dyslexic. This is insane. Like I said, I have a nephew who was much my, well, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
That's a nephew who was diagnosed with it, but he's a smart kid.
Yeah.
He's not, you wouldn't look at him and think he's reading words backwards. He's not doing that.
No,
Um,
that's a fallacy, but that's
yeah,
that's the sign. Like my older daughter wasn't doing that at all, but she couldn't retain her alphabet. My younger
interesting.
daughter we haven't had her diagnosed yet, but like you just did, we're like, okay, she
Yeah.
is reversing her letters. And it's something that now we know how to learn better. And I think the thing for me, like I found out like 3 of my cousins are all dyslexic and they knew that, like
Mm-hmm.
their parents knew that. And it never dawned on the side of my family that it is to be like, those cousins we all know have dyslexia. I wonder if Heather does, because I always made up for it. Like I always overcompensated with
Yes.
talking too much and networking and like
Yep.
negotiating my grades to where I wanted them to be. But I think for my kids, it makes me happy that when they get frustrated, I can say to them, our brains work differently. So we have to learn differently. We have to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to learn,
Yeah.
and just employing different, like using things like Speechify and Perplexity so that my kids can like talk to their iPad and ask a question and hear the answer. I think kids are set up so much better these days than they were when we were growing up.
This is a topic I could talk to you about for the next 4 hours for sure, because there's so much more to dig through here. But I want to be cognizant of your time, and there's a topic I know we wanted to really talk about. So
Yeah.
first of all, thank you for all of that, and thank you for sharing that. People are put in front of me for a reason. And aside from the conversation we're about to have, this has been incredibly valuable to me and hopefully to those listening and watching as well. Heather, you work Channel Maven on the side of the channel. So for the audience, let me explain channel a little bit. I'm going to break it down to simple speak. Goods, services, technology are brought from producers, manufacturers, et cetera, to consumers in a myriad of different ways. And we'll use technologies just as an example. You can go to Microsoft's website and put in your credit card. If you're a company, you can call a rep, or put any other logo just about in front of that. Or you can call what's called a channel partner, an agent. I liken it to insurance.
Yeah.
You can call State Farm, then you can call Farmers, then you can call Allstate and Geico and make 5 calls and speak to them about the same exact thing 5 times and get all your rates and terms back, and then decide what to do independently. Or you can go to an insurance broker, and the broker does all that legwork for you and then comes back and says, hey, Heather, I know about your home. I know about your auto. I know about your ring. I know about your grandma's heirlooms. I know about all this stuff. And here is a package of insurance that will appropriately cover you. These are the best rates. These are the best terms. This is the best coverage. technology works exactly the same way. So interestingly enough, I've always been in the 8 years I've been trusted advisor in the channel, I've consumed the programs that these technology providers have put out there through solution distributors. What that means in simple speak is I have this ecosystem of 350 different technology companies. They all have programs to attract independent advisors, or in our sake, a company. And we go out, we engage with customers, we do this kind of thing, relationships, rapport, trust, all of that. And we build strong foundations to help people achieve better things for their business. We are then paid by the providers, and those providers figure out how to pay people like me with the help of people like Heather. How did I do?
Perfect.
Okay.
I love it.
I've been through that a couple of times, but
Yeah.
so Heather works with companies who want to engage or install a channel program into their company to bring their products, services, et cetera, to the independent agent market. Heather, in your words, tell us a little bit about that from your perspective, and then, well, I got a million questions, so we'll see how many we could fit in here.
Yeah. Well, and so it's been an evolution. When I started at EMC in the early 2000s, it was the technology companies held all the power because there were so few of them, and their products were, name brands, so to speak. Like the CIO at our customer's company would go to their channel partner, also called a solution provider, and say, I want EMC storage, and I want HP servers, and I want Cisco networking and this software. And that's shifted quite a bit. One, there are more technologies than ever. Two, we're not selling solutions so much as a business outcome. And there are fewer companies that have like a CIO and an entire team. The solution provider has become that sort of outsourced CIO. So when the technology companies realized that now the solution providers had the power, the programs had to shift. The way the programs used to be, I liken it to like a credit card company, right? You spend this much, you get these points, here are your benefits. And they used to make you jump through a lot of hoops, right? Like you had to hit a revenue target. You had to have a certain number of people certified, technical certifications, sales certifications, marketing certifications. You had to have a demo unit. When I will not name the company I worked at after EMC, but we used to make people buy a 45,000 80-pound demo unit and drive around with it in the back of their car. Like, who would do that now?
It's like the Ray Kroc McDonald's movie with Michael Keaton when he had to travel with the milkshake machine. He's
got everything in the back. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, except this didn't make milkshakes. It just like lit up and nobody wanted it. So the shift had come in that, one, you have a ton more technologies in the ecosystem that you can choose from. And two, you're more business savvy. When I say you, I mean a channel partner.
Yeah, understood.
Is more business savvy, is more sales savvy than they were 20 years ago. So things have really shifted, and programs used to be very out of the box. Like everybody had a certain number of requirements. Everybody had a certain number of benefits. And it really was, decisions were based on the technology. Well, now the technology is almost identical, within like 2 or 3 standard deviations of each other. The way that technology is getting sold through solution providers is by making the solution provider's life easier. Like, who's easiest to do business with? Who understands what I need to be successful? So things like incentive programs, instead of just like giving you an incentive for selling something, it's giving you an incentive for doing something that builds your business, like running an event for prospects or running an email campaign. And it doesn't just become part of what you get So the way that a solution provider makes money usually is, let's say the product's $1,000. The solution provider can buy it for $700 and decide what to do with the 300. Do they want to discount it so that they make sure they win the sale? Do they want to pocket all of that to help build their business? Now it instead of the incentive just being like, here's another $100, it's how can we help you better build your business? So what Channel Maven does is figure out those elements and then also communicate to partners, because on a regular basis, you're getting communicated to by how many? 100 different companies that you've at some point sold. So it's our philosophy that we want to communicate what the channel partner wants to hear, when and where they want to hear it. And we do a lot with social. We do a lot with helping the channel chief or like the head of channels sort of become more authentic and more personable, and not just like some person sitting in a tower, but someone who listens to you and understands your business. And then we also help channel partners drive sales and marketing with money from the technology company.
Yeah. A few years back, I was watching the Super Bowl, infamous for its commercials that come on, right? People wait all year to see what kind of commercials are going to come from the Super Bowl.
How many Budweiser commercials are there going to
be? All that other stuff, right? But to this day, I mean, I get goosebumps when I think about this legitimately. There was a commercial for mortgage brokers. It wasn't, and there was no company name.
Yeah.
It wasn't Heather's Mortgage Brokerage,
yeah.
Vic's Mortgage Brokerage. It was, hey, if you're going to get a mortgage, going to a broker is your best bet. Because if you go directly to one bank, then you've got to rinse, repeat, go to 4 or 5 banks. If you went to a broker, they're going to understand you, your finances, your situation, the terms and conditions you want. Do you want no points? Do you want a quarter point? Do you want a half a point? Do you want a buy down rate? When do you want to close? Do you want a no doc loan? I mean, it's like all of these things they know, and then they go do all the legwork. When I talk to all the TSD CEOs, I've talked to Mike Bauer, I've talked to Ian Kinninger at Avant, Adam Edwards at Talaris about this, and I said, you guys need to get together and fund a campaign that pitches the trusted advisor, which is Drew Leideker's term for the agent. You need to pitch it, and not Vic's company, D&M Enterprise Group, not this company or that company, like that we are the better choice. Because all the things you say up front, and you'll see it, I've spent a lot of time lately building up a little bit more of a persona on LinkedIn. First of all, my Friday thing teaser alert here is I love what I do. Yeah. And that's the general theme, but there are all these reasons why loving what you do benefits everybody. Starts with the customer, comes back to you. The second piece around something that I've put out there is about, the thing that I've been posting quite a bit about, which is my second book, is the RFP is dead. Right? And so I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see it. I'll send you an advanced copy when it's out.
Please.
Like those processes of an RFP, I might as well write down notes today, because you see I've got a little thing I'm writing. I might as well have a tablet and a chisel, right, and a hammer. I might as well be doing that, because you're so boxed into that process. So I love what you say, but I want a little bit back to support a point, but I want to talk about incentives, because you have really, this is a topic I talk to all the CROs about. There's an old saying, show me your incentive plan and I will tell you how people will behave, right? I didn't come up with it. I've heard it for 30 years, at least. I forget where I read it. We can chat GPT or Google it and we'll find out who said it. And I once had success in working with a chief revenue officer. He was new to the company and we were having dinner in Vegas at Channel Partners. And he said, what could we do better to help your business? And I'll leave names and name of the company out, but for the sake of this, let's call him John Doe. I said, John, I'm going to tell you a big problem you have here. I said, you incent only new logos.
Yeah.
And you pay 3x, 4x, 5x spiff for a new logo. And there's no incentive for skin in the game. There's no incentive for a renewal of a contract, the second renewal, the third renewal. These are 3-year contracts.
Yeah.
There's none. I said, you are incenting the hit and run person. You're incenting somebody to go do a $3,000 MRR deal, get a $9,000 or $12,000 bonus, and that account dies after the first term.
No, they take it to another company to get their net new incentive.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's basically
Yeah.
saying that you should go back to your customer, not that you would because you want to do what's best for your customer, but go back to your customer and say, oh, I actually know about this new company that you should be working with.
Totally.
Instead of,
Totally.
you're, by the way, 70% more likely to sell to an existing customer.
Of course.
So he should be incenting upsell and cross-sell and renewal.
Now, to his credit, very few will do upsell. So if you do something and the timing is that new logo, 100 licensees, but it's a slow roll. And if you haven't had the opportunity to write in, hey, we're going to be 1,000 seats, but we're going to have a progressive rollout. If you do that, you can get incented on the whole thing. But let's say you're in bed with a startup that you just know is funded to the max. The people who've been there and have done that before in spades, like this thing's going to the moon, right? 25 seats to start for their startup crew. Thing grows to 2,000 seats, no incentives. But this CRO, what I did is I invited him to come along with me on the renewal ride. It was the second renewal, so we turned it 3 years. It was almost 6 years in. It was 5.5 months. And I wanted to work on a package with this particular company to keep the company vested in staying with this solution. What we were going to do is better for them. And I wanted to show him how hard we worked to make sure that this 3-year this now end of 6 years went to 9.
Yeah.
To his credit, he went along on the ride. John bootstrapped himself to me, got on my calls, listened, read emails, and it was done. And they signed a renewal for another 4 years because we gave him great incentives to lock in price. Yeah. He gave me a giant incentive. And he said, I said, he goes, you worked 3 times as hard making sure this happened again. What I didn't say to him was, I'm going to pull him away. I have too much integrity for that. I'm not going to pull a customer away from a great solution, cause disruption, and tell them why they need to go somewhere else. Many of my peers do. I get it, right? They get it because if I move this $3,000 deal to the next $3,000 deal, means I'm going to get another 9 or 12 or 6 or whatever it is. How often is the dialogue in your space around this incentives and incenting the right behavior? And at what time do you actually drive these incentives?
Yeah. So, you're asking the right person because when I worked at EMC, I ran the incentive program, and then the company that ended up buying Channel Maven that I just spun back out of is 360 Insights, which is one of the largest channel incentive management platforms. So we talk a lot about building behaviors that you want. Renewing is the behavior that you want. So not only should you be incenting the solution provider, the channel partner who is helping with that renewal, you should also be incenting the customer to renew as well. So when we talk about incentives, they're different. There's the typical spiff, which is a sales incentive, which is like, great, you sold something for $1,000. We're going to give you $100. There's the rebate, which is after the fact. And I caution with rebates because sometimes they become part of the sale. Like, I know I'm going to get a 30% margin and I'm going to get a 10% rebate. That sort of like what that does in their brain makes it a 40% margin, not an actual incentive. And also, especially one of the companies I worked at that was much smaller, our incentives were like in a spreadsheet. If they get it 6 months later, they don't remember what deal it was for anyway. So you're not actually incenting a behavior. You're just like kicking cash back over. And then you have things like MDF, market development funds. So
Yep.
giving partners money that they can use to do some sort of sales and marketing activities. But again, if you tie it to revenue, then there are these growth partners that are ready to grow and they're hungry and maybe they're more sophisticated when it comes to sales and marketing, but they're not hitting your revenue target. That's why those types of incentives should be proposal based. If a partner comes to a technology company and says, I'm going to do this event and here's where I'm getting my list and here's how I'm going to attract them and here's how we're going to like the next steps after to drive sales. That to me is worth way more than a partner who just like churns out revenue and you're giving them MDFs and they're like taking people on golf outings, which are not necessarily driving sales.
We get a lot of MDF, by the way, and 100% of it goes back into generating new business.
Yeah.
That's it. And we just actually rolled out an elite program, elite provider program, where you participate on an annual basis. We ask them to commit for 3. They can back out after the first year. It's not a big deal. We give a piece of the MDF back.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. Okay.
No.
Like based on revenue, like this was our differentiator. Hey, if we win, we're giving 50% of the MDF back to you on our first deal or second deal, whatever it takes to generate it. And we're going to engage with your sales and marketing team to come up with strategies. And we do a lot of outreach and we're starting to find some really great success from it. Oh my God, my head's all over the place. This is my favorite topic in the universe.
Yeah. But I think if you
something.
think about like, when you're buying a car and the salesperson says, you're going to get a survey that asks you how I did. If you give them all 10s, they get whatever, $200, $300.
Yes.
If they get one thing below a 10, they get nothing.
0.
So nothing. I think that de-incentivizes the salesperson from one. Every salesperson I've ever worked with to buy a car has said, you're going to get a survey. Please give me all 10s.
Yeah.
So you're not getting real feedback. Whereas if you got more real feedback and still gave the salesperson something, if everything's above a 6, they should still get it. Then you're getting real feedback and you're able to build your business instead of incentive just sort of becoming like that's what everybody wants. I'm just going to give them all 10s.
The thought process there is that they're driving to perfection in the process. Who gets perfection? I mean, that's almost unachievable on a consistent basis. There'll be times we achieve perfection. If I'm selling you a car, I'd like to make sure I did all the right things. I went through my checklist. Something's going to happen. Stuff happens. I too, when I purchased the car, they said, I need to get 5 stars, and they told me across the board, or I get nothing. And if there's something I haven't done, please tell me right now, because the only way I make money in this business is if I get this incentive.
Well, and it's also based on one of the questions is how was the dealership like when you walked in? And one time I bought a car, it was a really small satellite, but it was super convenient to me. It was 10 minutes from my house. I could actually walk over and pick up the car. It was a little more run down. I still gave him a 10 because it's not his fault that the dealership's run down. There's a lot when you're talking about incentives, you want to change someone's behavior, not make it something that they just expect. Like, of course, I'm going to get the extra $100 spiff. You want them to need to do something to get that. It needs to go above and beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and I could stay on this topic forever around spiffs, but I want to move into other places of the channel. What are you seeing from a company perspective? Like, how heavy are people leaning into investing more in their channel programs? Yeah. Be painfully honest.
So, part of the story too. So I sold Channel Maven and this other technology platform that I had come up with called Spark Your Channel in 2021. And I ran marketing for 360 Insights. And then about a year ago, my boss and I started talking about like, I'm an entrepreneur. They hired a bulldozer when they needed a shovel. And they gave me the name back. They put me on retainer. We have a really good relationship, and everyone I talk to can't believe like how well this worked out for everyone involved. So since I've taken it back, I didn't do consulting for 3 years. I was SVP of marketing, for 360 Insights. Coming back into it, people are spending a lot less money, and it depends on the technology, right? Like AI and cybersecurity, they are flush and doing well
Yep.
and still paying into their partners. Some of the larger companies that used to, sell probably 40% of revenue came through the channel. You're just seeing one, they're letting go of their channel chief, and they're having like a VP of channel sales, a VP of channel marketing, a VP of channel programs roll up to the VP or the CRO, the CMO and COO. And the challenge I see there is there are lots of conversations that the channel chief would take to the CRO or the CMO and say, our partners need content that isn't just customer content and we've changed the name of it. Like
Yeah.
they need actual content that includes their value proposition. They need the value proposition to a channel partner isn't our product works the best, our product is the fastest. It's you're going to make more money. Implementation is going to be easier. You're going to be able to wrap services around this. So having someone at a C level to go toe to toe with the CMO and say, these are the things we need, or go toe to toe with the CFO and say, this is why we need to fund MDF. A lot of companies are losing that. So this started happening like 2.5 years ago. And I'm finally starting to see those companies in the last like 6 months say, oh yeah, we need a channel chief. We're going to now we're going to go back and hire a channel chief, because their partners are leaving them for the companies that are still investing in the channel. And then you're lopping off that long tail of revenue and giving it to your competitor.
There's an interesting that happened, and I'll leave the names, but let's call them TSD 1, 2, and 3. When I first got involved as a consumer of things through the channel, it was through my now business partner, a guy named Steve Gerhardt, who I was a customer of when he worked at telecom companies, and then he decided to go off and become an agent in the channel in 2001. And I've been the CIO of 5 companies through my career. Anytime I needed the things that were in his ecosystem, he was always my first call. Pardon me. He cared more. He delivered faster. He knocked all the noise out of the way. We were in most of the companies I were in these growth modes. When it came to connectivity, we needed it fast. We needed things knocked out of the way. He always got it done. His back office was, and still is, our back office is amazing. I'm part of that company now. And so what happened along the way is, and I watched from, the outer ring, I watched this loyalty network get built by TSD. If you were a TSD in ecosystem 1, you didn't put your business anywhere else. If you were a TSD, a TA rather, in ecosystem 2, you were there, 3, etc. There was a big change in my space with the very first sale of the first TSD to a bigger company, and everything changed. For the first time ever, agents or trusted advisors got nervous. First and foremost, the light bulb went on, went, holy cow, the stuff I do is worth a pretty sick multiple. Okay, I got to get me some of that. It's no longer that my recurring revenue is good enough. Most people I met up until that point said it's recurring revenue. If anything ever happened to me, I told my wife, don't sell the business. It'll run for another 10 years. Give everybody a raise the day I die.
Yeah.
But now these multiples that are getting paid, they're life changing. And these businesses have great long-term strategic value to the right acquirer.
Yeah.
So what happens now, and I'm getting to a point here, is that I could tell you D&M, we've got agreements with 3 TSDs. And we use them very specifically. Yeah. At first, we expanded our TSD because some had providers in it that we didn't have access to. And if a customer knocks on our door and one particular provider weren't in the ecosystem, I was not going to not show them that provider. we may whittle it down. I might not think they're great, but if I didn't show that to them, this whole non-bias thing just got washed out. It was done. So here's the interesting thing that's happening from my lens. I am constantly having conversations with people in the channel who say, hey, I'm in these 3 ecosystems. It costs me a lot of money to be a part of all 3 of them. I got 15,000 total agents in the United States. I want to say 7,000 to 9,000 of them are strapped across all 3. I go to their events. I see the same faces, but I've paid 3 times to get in front of them. I'd rather give you the money. Like if we're a top agent in the business, if you take out the aggregators now, I bet we're number 1 or maybe number 2. You put the aggregators in, the Upstacks and those who have put 15, 20 agencies together, clearly they're bigger than us. But from an independent perspective, we're definitely in the top 2 or 3. And they want to work with people with energy and they want to produce. So if you're on that side of the equation, like now you're talking to the people who are probably saying, Heather, I'm paying to go to this event, TSD1. I'm paying to go to TSD2. I'm paying to go to TSD3. I'm sponsoring the top performers clubs and the president's club trips for all this stuff. And when I show up, I see Vic at all of these things. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I love Vic. He's great. He's good for my business, but I'm paying for him 3 times. What's your perspective on that? What's the conversation like from your perspective, and what are people doing about it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head in the beginning, is that there are elements that you would miss out on if you weren't at all 3 of those. And what I'm seeing companies do is build an ecosystem around each one. You have TSD1, and then you have technologies that you sell around TSD1, and that you make this ecosystem or this bubble that you can productize. And then you make another one around TSD2 and you can productize that. So depending on which customer comes in and wants which ecosystem, you have all 3 of those offerings. It's like walking into the grocery store and expecting that they're only going to have 1 brand of yogurt. Like you kind of need to be at all 3 of those things. If I'm the company that's paying for you to be at all 3, I'm trying to figure out how to incent you to focus on one. And you can look at your business. I'm sure you know already what percentage of revenue goes through each of the 3 of those.
Oh, yeah.
So do you, one, form a alliance with a company just like yours and say, for everyone that wants TSD1, we'll take them. For everyone that wants TSD2, you take them and you give us 10%. And everyone who wants TSD3 goes to this 3rd company like yours and you get 10%. The challenge there is I'm a salesperson, right? Like I refer business to partners of mine all the time. I have the benefit that I'm rebuilding the exact same company from a blank slate. I'm not going to mess up the things I messed up before.
Yeah.
And I know the direction I want to go in, right? I'm not building it the way I built it in 2009. That would be silly. But I also know as a salesperson that I'm competitive. So you need to be able to look at the referral as a win. Like you still won the deal. You just want it for this person who's going to be paying you in perpetuity. My goal for 2025 is for 20% of my revenue to be from referral income. Me referring 20% of my revenue out to other people. So I think it's an emotional, like, personality shift you need to make, or you just need to be at all 3 of those. And those companies need to understand that if they want to get your attention, they just have to be the best at wooing.
How'd you like that to be 50%?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sure. We'll talk after the episode. But no, I get what you're putting down, and maybe I didn't explain myself exactly right. We have these 3 ecosystems, and what you're saying is, for me, maybe I do connectivity through 1, maybe I do AI and contact center through 2, and maybe I do cybersecurity through 3 very disparate examples. And that's cool. And largely when I got into number 2 And number three, it was because they were strong in those areas.
Totally.
Right. So that example is real life. But when I'm at number two and I'm doing AI and they want more of my business, they go, hey,
what about connectivity? We
what
do
are you
that
doing
too.
about that next Lumen deal? What are you doing about that new, that new AT&T thing or that new Mettel deal? Like, how do we get that? We'll match your comp plan over at number one. These guys are all eating each other's lunch.
Yeah.
So your vision is really a conversation for the solution distributors, which they'll never have because, poor man want to be rich man want to be king. King ain't satisfied until he rule everything. Little Bruce Springsteen for you. But but that's what's happening there. So for me, I break it up. We stick with, and we have a very do the right thing mantra. We dance with the person who brought us to the dance. And so if I made an introduction to a provider through being a new provider, through being at an ecosystem event, which they paid for me to be at, and they fed me and they did all these things and they educated us, gave us materials, I am not bringing that opportunity to the next lane. Other people do it.
Yeah.
Other people do it, but that's, it doesn't fall on our do the right thing, from business perspective.
As a trusted advisor, your customer also wants you to tell them who has the best connectivity and who has the best UI and who, you need to make the decisions that are right, one, for your business and two, for your customers. So I think it's understood. I think it's, a necessary evil and everyone's doing the same thing. And it's ethical. Like there's nothing, to your point, you dance with the person who brought you to the dance. That's all they can ask for.
Yeah. And remember in my side of the channel here, there's this entire ecosystem of the 350 providers. There's a solution distributor who basically has signed up all those providers. Yeah. And then there's us that consumes, and then there's the customer. So if I want to bring the customer an SD-WAN opportunity, I'm going to go to all the same providers, but it's which middle layer it actually gets managed through. And so they're all, they're all fighting for our business.
But it would also be silly to put them all through one, right? Yeah. If you only went through one TSD, then what happens if something happens to that TSD? Or what happens if, they make one of your biggest competitors like their primary partner and they are promoting that partner all the time? Like you just...
Yeah, there is that challenge, and especially as the landscape changes, I think the possibility of something like that becomes larger and larger. What I will tell you is that from an accounting perspective, they all don't do the same job in collecting the appropriate commissions and then getting you paid with accuracy. So sometimes it's like, hey, and it's also about the integrity of the contracts they have with the providers.
Right.
Some of these folks invest tens of millions of dollars into that part of the platform, and others are like, yeah, we're good with Verizon. And then all of a sudden they're doing 10 million a month versus 200 million a month. And they decide for that TSD, they're going to cut a new deal. So you're right. We have to be diversified, and that's been the main part of it. But, I want to get you going here because I know we got a little bit of a time crunch. We've been at it for a great amount of time. I think if anybody listens, they know we got a lot more to talk about today. But I'm going to I'd love to have you back. And I would love to have you come back on because not only do I really enjoy talking to you, but I love, this is what I do. This is my topic. And so, and I love your perspective on that. So I want to give you the last few words and then we'll say some nice things. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate this so much. And this is what I'm super passionate about, right? The conversation we're having about how these 3 TSDs get your business, that's what Channel Maven does, right? Like if one of them hired us, then you would have the best incentives, the best communications to you. You'd be like, wow, they're all over LinkedIn and they're following me and they're reposting my content. They truly understand my business. They're giving me the resources I need to sell and market myself. They're helping me with trainings on how to do social selling. and they had a keynote come speak who taught all about how to help build business. Those are the things that I really get excited for. And especially when it's only 3 companies sort of pitted against each other versus 20, it's very easy to see when they're doing it right and attracting your attention and really understanding your business, being authentic about it, not just saying, oh, Channel Maven told us we have to do this, but educating them that there's an opportunity for them to really build their business with you because they understand your business and you can tell that they understand your business.
Awesome. Hey, exceeded expectations. How's that for a grade for today? Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, just love it. You're smart and insightful, super easy and fun to talk to. I'm going to make a prediction north of 50,000 views on this episode. We'll see if I'm right. I've had a couple that just hit 50 and 52. I think this be good, and can't thank you enough for coming on and making time for me and for giving your wisdom and your personality to the people watching.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. And I love having these conversations. So would love to come back.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.